Hello and welcome to an Infinity the Game battle report. Today we're playing the Kestrel Colonial Force against Tohaa and the scenario is Acquisition. Now this list and the raison d'etre behind today's battle report generally comes from channel supporter Mr. Pink Panzer, who made the request some time ago now for a game featuring a Kestrel list with a Squalos HMG in one combat group and a Red-Eye close air support unit in the other. Now, vehicles are something that I have had on my radar to play with and actually properly develop experience with and explore for a fair while now in Infinity. But that is something that I have wanted to do, but which is nevertheless conflicted with my general assessment of most of them as being a little bit crap. My initial assessment, basically of the entire class of them, and I don't think this is wrong exactly, is that being Silhouette 7 and having the no cover rule is a combination of things that together really sucks. Now, that is a limitation that every vehicle shares, and which they attempt to make up for with super jump, jet propulsion, and an incredibly long leash on a per order basis with how far they can move, the kind of height that they can get, the plunging fire, and just generally the angles and shots that they can take. And so it was always going to be at least a little while before I got around to really looking at vehicles properly, because it was invariably going to take some games for me to get my head around, just with anything, how really transformative long-range jet propulsion movements can actually be for a class of miniature. And it was actually my games with the Garuda Tactbot, which I do still hold is just a better vehicle than every vehicle in the game, that kind of opened my eyes a little bit to, no, we can do something with this. And so with that in mind, I've been on a little bit of a tear recently, just trying to try out, if possible, every vehicle in the game. Now, I probably won't get to all of them. I did, in my infinite wisdom, start with the Zabak from Hackislam. No, I won't be publishing that battle report. No, it's not particularly good. But I will, at some point, if possible, try to play as many of them as I can. Is this in any way connected to the recent render released at Interplanetario for the Zabak, which looks incredible and has easily won the best model in vehicle category without even seeing any of the others? Yes, possibly. I'm actually really excited to own that, although the number of times it will play as a Zabak is probably pretty limited. But for here and now, we're going to talk about the Red-Eye and then this list generally. Now, as noted, the only restriction for this battle report request, apart from play Kestrel Colonial Force, is to get in different combat groups a Squalos and a Red-Eye. Now, that is collectively well over 100 points spoken for of a list, but it's still the kind of restriction that we can operate under and produce probably a bunch of different lists if we put our mind to it. In this case, the second thing to experiment with in this list is just that I've kind of come to the conclusion that tactical awareness Pathfinder drone bots are really cool. And so we're going to be using two of them and as many tactical awareness orders as we can fit to reach a 20 order Kestrel Colonial Force list. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a showcase in how not all orders, and certainly not all tactical awareness orders, are created equally. Because if we look at the smaller of the two combat groups first, what we see is a Squallow with HMG and grenade launcher. I really like this profile, by the way, and the grenade launcher would be important on exactly one occasion this game, but it would absolutely be important this game. And it is duoed with a Pathfinder drone bot. They don't get duo bonuses, they just share their tactical awareness orders. The Pathfinder does all of those cool Pathfinder things. It is a specialist, it has a deactivator, it is a repeater, and it is a forward observer with Whip 13 as a specialist, which by Pan-Oceanian standards is fine. And for the Pathfinder, it really does represent a free order for the Squalos. Tags want to move forward and then move back, get into striking range and then pull back to safety. There is almost always a way to spend a spare order on a Squalos, and so this second combat group really can be conceived of as a 7-order group, despite the fact that those orders are baked into tactical awareness orders, which are constrained to the Squalos and the Pathfinder. This exact duo is one that I have been really impressed with in Kestrel Colonial Force just generally. It's flexible, it's dangerous, it offers you a variety of different options, it will be a performer this game. To support that, then we've got a Tech B. Tech B always has to be in the same group as the Squalos. You will note that there is no other engineer in this list. We are just going straight in with a Gizmo kit and Speedball and no other way to recover the Squallow. I am totally fine with risking that. There are not enough other things in the list that I would routinely expect to go down that I can recover with an engineer, even with the Red-Eye being present. I don't have total reaction bots or anything. I'm fine running just the Tech B and Speedball as recovery mechanisms. We then have the first of 2 Jackals and a War Correspondent. The War Correspondent's kind of necessary here because we are running pretty light. in terms of points available after we've taken the Squallow and the Red Eye, but Walkers are good in this ITS season. Jackals, just for reference, are possibly one of the best profiles in the entire game. Like all Jackals. Jackals are just incredible. They're foundational strength to Kestrel Colonial Force. It is the ability to take usually two Jackal infiltrators that I think is part of why Kestrel is just an incredible faction. One of the, if not potentially the best faction in the game right now, because for 1 SWC and 22 points, you get just an absolute grab bag of defensive utility, right? Because a boarding shotgun and a boarding pistol on an 11-point disposable irregular in the midfield, that would be good as a roadblock already, before we account for the fact that they've also got mine layer and shock mines, and on top of all of that, at no additional SWC cost, we get midfield specfire EM grenades using our irregular orders. This is like the perfect irregular defensive piece. It can always productively spend its irregular order. I have had multiple pants browning moments where a Kestrel opponent has been like, oh, I don't even need to spend this irregular order on. I'm just going to spec fire that model I think is your lieutenant, or that tag, or that heavy infantry. These things are incredible. There are so many strengths in Kestrel Colonial Force that make it a fantastic faction, but the Jackal infiltrating mine layer is one of them, and we have two in this list. So this second group is very, very good at always making use of its tactical awareness orders, because the Squallow is such a central piece to this combat group, and it always benefits from that movement. The first combat group is actually a bit of an example of how not all tactical awareness orders are created equal. To go through from top to bottom, we have a Magistrate Fire team. This list is just running 1 Duo, 1 Core, and 1 Haris, so we take the Jackal team in Haris, with the cheapest possible Magistrate for Strategos and counterintelligence. Again, we're talking about things that are absolutely incredible. It is a testament to Kestrel's strength that the Magistrate Lieutenant is not taken in 100% of lists. The fact that there are genuinely competing options for this guy is mind-blowing and would be an incredible luxury for any other faction. He's got the two Jackals. That's 31 points for 4 orders and counterintelligence. It does not get better than that. We then have a 4-person fire team, and this is an example of how not all tactical awareness orders are created equal. It's a good team. It consists of the Griffin. Now, in this version, we've got a HMG. Just to be aware, there's going to be a very small change that you'll see in the battle report. For plus and minus 1 point, this Griffin can be upgraded to a Feuerback. In the game that we're going to play, we will actually run this as a Feuerback, and I think that is probably the better choice overall. This first draft of the list had the HMG, but you do want the ability to crack armor. The HMG would unquestionably have been better versus the Tohaa opponent that I'm playing against. You really don't need Feuerback style weapons against Tohaa, and higher burst HMGs just going to be very, very useful. But in the interest of being a bit more generalist, if you were to play a list like this yourself, change the Griffin into a Feuerback, as we did during this game. Just having the anti-armor rounds is something that's going to be useful enough of the time to warrant. The Griffin is then going to be paired with a Pathfinder with Tactical Awareness, by Panda with Tactical Awareness, and a Fennec Hacker. And it's in a list like this that we can see, this kind of fire team is not actually always going to want to move. And that makes the tactical awareness orders in it much less true orders contributing to a 20 order count than the Squallow and its Pathfinder. The Squallow will always value relocating. This fire team won't. Sometimes it won't have anything to do. You don't always want to move teams of troops out into the midfield. Sometimes it isn't time. Sometimes they don't need they're just serving as an ARO piece. And sometimes you have something like the Griffin is dead and I don't want the team to go anywhere. That makes the tactical awareness orders in this fire team actually much less meaningful. Still nice to have, still contributes to the fact that this list has 20 orders to spend in any given turn, but in this case, for example, in this game, we will see the Pathfinder butt off and go and do its own thing, because that was the best use of the orders at the time. If I were going to iterate on this list again and further, one of the changes that I would actually probably make is to find the 1 point in the game that we played to get the Griffin into a HMG, we gave the Red Eye, we cut its grenade launcher down into a Blitzen. I would actually put the grenade launcher back, and I would cut the Pathfinder Drone Bot for a second Yamabushi. We don't need its tactical awareness order. It lets this fire team be a little bit more passive, and Yamabushi are very good and very useful, and in this game I wished I had a second one. Anyway, this fire team, nevertheless, really nice. It's got the Pathfinder, it's got by Pandra. The single Fennec Hacker is not going to do particularly much this game compared to, for example, a Fennec Forward Observer with a Disco Ball. I would really like to have had some visibility control, basically in any game, but also in this game. But since I have all of these repeaters, as a general rule, having some kind of a hacking presence is kind of nice, and I don't particularly worry about the Fennec dying, because if it dies, the Griffin and my Pandra both still count as Fennecs, and so I don't lose that all-important duo bonus. It's worth it to kind of have, you can risk having a hacker, a vulnerable hacker in the link team without it being a big deal, but also strongly consider getting a Fennec Forward Observer because they're really, really good because they have disco balls. We've then got our second Jackal, our Red Eye. As noted, in this game, we would be cutting the grenade launcher for a Blitzen in order to find the point to give the Griffin a flareback. If you're running this yourself, keep the grenade launcher and turn the Pathfinder into a second Yamabushi. And then we have a Yamabushi. Now, people have kind of realized over time that only being forward deployment 4 on a Yamabushi is a limiting constraint. Launching attacks into your opponent's deployment zone with a Yamabushi, finding a really good deployment spot for Yamabushi, is actually a little bit more difficult than we would like, and they are kind of, as a result, mostly just very, very good corner guards that can sometimes push into the midfield and strike something there. That's still incredible for 16 points, given how good they are in close combat and the rest of the kit that they're packing. But it is a limitation that has downgraded the Yamabushi from, oh my god, this thing's incredible, to, this is very, very good. In this game, however, since we're playing Acquisition, the Yamabushi has more space to play with. 16-inch deployment zone plus 4 puts it at a 20 inches total possible deployment. And frankly, the way the game played out, I would really like to have had a second one of these. It's going to be instrumental in terms of first turn defense, but it is just always good to have some kind of close assault, close combat striking power in your list. Redundancy on that front, particularly given it's only 16 points, is well worthwhile. Overall, this is a list I was very happy with. The Red Eye is being given the maximum possible chance to perform, and it will do just fine this game. But it is also a piece that you could potentially consider removing and exchanging for anything else that's 1.5 SWC, 45 points kind of thing. Anything that can move independently and be an order outlet does contend reasonably evenly with it for slots in the list. And while there's a lot about the Red Eye to like, it is also still a ballistic skill 13 Spitfire for 45 points. And that's always going to mean that it is a sometimes food, drink, that you want to build a list with a reasonably specific plan in mind for. In this game, the plan is, let's see what the Red Eye can do, and we're going to make sure it has as many orders as possible to do those things, as well as fire support to make sure that it has a clear run whenever it wants to go and do something. And in that context, as we'll see, it's going to perform basically fine. Now, playing against me for this game, we have one of my regular opponents and very good player, Ed. And in this game, Ed is doing some testing out a few pieces. There are some things in this list as we go through that I will call out that are very specifically being played here to see how they perform. And the first of those is the Galrail Sniper in the first smaller combat group. So this combat group operates with a Libertos Mine Layer, a Diplomatic Delegate, a Galrail Sniper, a Kael'tar Chain of Command, and a regular Kael'tar. In this list, in this kind of configuration, this is a common, at least for me and locally, a common Tohaa small combat group configuration. I would almost say combat group 2, but Ed is being a psycho and puts the small combat group as combat group 1. An act which, if Infinity had existed in the Middle Ages, would certainly have seen him committed. But in this kind of a group, normally we would see something like a Sukwale missile launcher, or more commonly locally, a Sukwale K1 sniper. That is as cheap as a Galrail. It is a discount firepower piece. It does cost more SWC, but because it has mimetism, because it has higher native ballistic skill, because it has K1 rather than just generic sniper rifle, it is just more useful against a wider variety of things. It survives AROs a little bit better. But Ed is testing the Galrail here for a couple of reasons. The first is it is 1 SWC. To get a Sukwale sniper into this list, the Libertos would need to lose its mine. Now, I do not mind exchanging the Libertos for a non-mine layer profile. The fact that the non-mine layer Libertos has a chain cult is much more relevant in N5 than it was in N4, but the mine is still nice to have, and losing it is meaningful. The second reason we're going to try out the Galrail here is that smoke shooting is really, really good in N5, and Sukwales are particularly vulnerable to it. They are a mimetism piece with no real ability, they have no ability to see through smoke. The Galrail has a much better face-to-face roll against something like a Mukta or an Intruder spilling up through a smoke grenade than a Sukwale does. And so because of that, there is some, at least, consideration for the fact that, hey, maybe this is a time where the Galrail is worth testing. And then finally, just on general principles, my appraisal is that the Sukwale K1 Sniper is much better than the Galrail, but that's an on-paper appraisal. I haven't played the Galrail. Ed is rigorous, and so he does play pieces like this. Now, after this game, do I think he will play the Galrail again? Probably not. But he can make that decision off the basis of actual testing rather than just doing an on-paper assessment, and that's very worthwhile. I would also note that for me, I would often comfortably run without the Keltar chain of command. That's another way you could free up some SWC to upgrade the Gal Rail to a Sukwail. I'm pretty comfortable running a single chain of command in Tohaa. Ed does like to run two, and as a result, I think I have almost never put him in Loss of Lieutenant, maybe once ever in any of our games. Combat Group 1 is where a lot more of the action is happening, and there are a couple of things being tested here as well, one of which is the Gau Tarsos Spitfire. Now, the Gau Tarsos is a piece that I had actually overlooked a little bit in N5, probably mistakenly. There was some inertia in that opinion. The Gau Tarsos was niche slash a little bit mediocre in every preceding edition, and so even though intellectually, like, yeah, jump troops all have jet propulsion, and jet propulsion is good, and I just spent a bunch of time talking about how jet propulsion is good when mentioning the Red Eye, did not ever really go back and reevaluate the Gau Tarsos. Ed plays things to test them, and the Gau Tarsos Spitfire, a Spitfire on a parachuting or super jumping in combat jumping, rather, jet propulsion piece, particularly one with multiple wounds, Spitfires are a very good weapon on a piece like that. They arrive in the midfield in good range bands. It gives them striking distance off, like for example, if they parachute in, it gives them striking distance halfway into the table, longer when you add in the super jumper movement or the regular movement. It is just a nice weapon to have on a piece like a Gau Tarsos, and we will see the Gau Tarsos do work in this particular game. It's obviously running solo, so our first fire team in Group 2 is Sukwail HMG, Attack Wheel Chain of Command. This is just going to be a duo. It is a very, very self-contained duo. The tack wheel generates smoke. It has ferroware. It is a specialist. The Sukwail is a gun. You really can't go wrong with this. They're going to, in this game, have some heavy lifting required of them in the late game, but just very, very lean, clean link team in addition to bringing Chain of Command to the list. We then have another, in this case, it's going to be a three-person fire team, running on kind of similar principles. A Sukwail Lieutenant Forward Observer K1 Combi Rifle, a Kriegel Agent. It's also got Mirror Ball, so it's doing some of the same things. It's providing that zone of control smoke with 2 dice. It's also got Ferroware Tactics Eraser, which is really nice. And then, and this is one of the other things that's being tested here, a Tagma Schema. Now, this game is going to be a showcase basically in the maximum possible impact a Tagma schema can have. Because of what it's going, firstly, it's going to provide counterintelligence. Ed will be going first this game. Secondly, it's going to be pretending to be a Gau Rail Spitfire. This is going to do 2 things. The first thing it's going to do is reasonably neatly conceal the SWC that the Gau Tarsos is consuming so that this list, when it deploys, looks like a 6 SWC list. The second thing it's going to do, a little bit inadvertently in this case, because Ed obviously deployed first in this game, and so deployed it pretending to be a Gal Rail Spitfire, is it's going to put my Red Eye into the absolute fear zone up until I'm finally able to get the jump on this thing in my active turn. Because as much as Gal Rails are a little bit mid in N5, any multi-wound MSV2 Spitfire is a colossal threat to a piece like a Red Eye. Now, one of the things that it also does, just kind of incidentally, is live a little bit rent-free in my head, because if we look at how this list is laid out, the reserve drop is going to be the Liberto. Now, the reserve drop is the Liberto, and we have a 31-point Gau Tarsos off the table. I can't count points in my head incredibly well, but that's about 40 points. And so when I'm deploying, my brain is going to say, there's a reasonably sized chunk left. It's also going to say, there is one SWC not visible. And knowing that there's one model off the table, but that it could be something like Eclipsos, which is not hugely expensive, and that there is one SWC unaccounted for, means that Greif operator alarm bells will go off in my head and will very materially impact my deployment in a way that may or may not have happened in the same way if I didn't have such a clean, there is 5 SWC visible here, if the Tagma had been pretended to be anything else. Mostly though, look, it's going to be concealing the SWC of the Gau Tarsos, it's going to be a link team member, it will draw a little bit of fire, and it provides counterintelligence, a good overall package for 16 points. We've got a Kestrel Preceptor. This is here a little bit to maybe be smoke for the Gau Rail Sniper Rifle. It will never do that during this game, and it is very bad at that because its fizz is very low. It's a reasonable value piece. Ed had kind of high hopes for it, but in this game it did what I usually expect Kestrel Preceptors to do, which is use the Surtur Symbio Beast primarily as a defensive element that will absorb some of my orders and then nothing else. And frankly, for 25 points, there are worse ways to spend points defensively. I personally really want the Preceptors to be really good, but they're just okay in this edition. We've then got 2 Chaxor Auxiliaries and a Motorized Bounty Hunter. It's the 9-point profile, which is just a great assault piece. It will combine well with the Libertos in Combat Group 1 to give you 2 irregular attack pieces on the first turn. With the caveat that this Galrail sniper rifle should probably be something else, much of this list is well thought out and well grounded, just with some very obvious caveats around experimental pieces that you wouldn't necessarily want to take, for example, in a list that you had to go and play a tournament with tomorrow. Now, quick note on the photos before we get into the game. Trying out to get a higher angle for this battle report in response to some viewer feedback. We're also trying out with the bottom part of the table. This is going to be my deployment zone. Just a little bit of an experiment to see how it feels in terms of doing the report. Do let me know, one, how does me taking photographs while standing on a chair affect the angle for the bat rep? And two, what is the orientation that we like to see battle reports from? Do we like to see my part of the table be the bottom side of the screen so I can talk about left and right flanks kind of from point of view perspective? Or do we prefer the fighting happening from left to right? What's your personal preference? Now, Ed wins the lieutenant role in this particular game, kind of wishes that he hasn't, because, and this is, look, this is something you do when you're doing testing experiences. Ed would, if we play a tournament game and Ed wins lieutenant role, he's going to pick deployment zone, and he's going to expect pretty reasonably that I will choose to go first. The game is then going to play out in a pretty predictable way because Ed knows exactly how to play Tohaa going second in acquisition. It's not necessarily a comfortable strategy because you do have to get punched for 3 consecutive turns, but Tohaa can take that and then they have lots of Eclipse. They have as close to perfect visibility control as you can get in a list, and in acquisition, if you can just survive your opponent's attempts to attrit you down into nothing for the first 3 turns, then on the final turn of the game, they can smoke out and get onto all of the objectives and win. I think given that I have counterintelligence and my order count and the list that I have in play and the fact that I'm playing Kestrel, if we were to play this game and Ed had won the LT role and basically set himself up to go second, I would give myself at least a reasonable chance of obtaining potentially a narrow win or at least holding him to a minor victory. But very intentionally, because he is extremely familiar with how to play this from a go second perspective, he just locked in first turn to give himself that experience and fair cop. So both of those things are worth considering when we evaluate this game. Ed is running a bunch of experimental stuff into a full-blown 20 order Kestrel list, and he's kind of handicapping himself here for the experience. So props to Ed for developing himself as a player in that way. It's a reason why he's one of the best players on the eastern coast of Australia. Now, in terms of Ed's deployment from left to right, the Galrail team with the Kael'tar is over here on the left in this building with the Galrail on a strong overwatch position. The Sukhwhale HMG and Takwheel Officer are both hanging out in the sort of like the gantry beneath this, or in the, I guess, the basement of this building. There's a little lower ground area there where they're nice and covered, able to move out in the later game. Because the Takwheel Officer is here and his Ferroway will need reloading, we also have, as a corner guard, a Chaxor Heavy Flamethrower over here. The other Chaxor is hanging out, I think, down here somewhere behind this building. The Kestrel Preceptor and Surda Beast. The Kestrel is on the rooftop and the Surda Beast is on the sort of like the lower level of this building here. We then have the fire team that contains the quote-unquote Galrail, Spitfire, and the Sukhwhale K1 Lieutenant, and the Kriegel agent. All of those are on the right flank over here, with the Galrail in a sort of like fake out firing position. It's using the 16-inch deployment zone. It will stay prone basically for the entire game, but it's positioned so that it looks like it could be a threat to move up and around here and potentially get some nice 24-inch fire lanes, maybe to this rooftop or this rooftop over here, where I might potentially position pieces with guns. It never intends to actually shoot because it is a fake. It is not really a Galrail Spitfire. But I am perfectly willing to believe it is, because Ed's already taken a Galrail Sniper, and if he's taken one Galrail, why not take 2? And I know the Galrail Sniper is real because it has a Symbiomate on it. Otherwise, we have the Diplomatic Delegate deployed relatively centrally, just nice and safe in this little nook behind this rampart, and the Motorized Bounty Hunter is going to be behind this building as well, ready to move out aggressively on the first turn. It rolls +2 armor, which is a pretty good result for it. The only other things worth noting are that Ed's HVT is down here at ground level near this SUV, and his QAZ creature is in a nook, basically very tightly constrained in this nook here, which is going to exactly mirror my own QAZ creature, which we can see on screen here. So both QAZ creatures are building like a fairly dangerous zone kind of in this space here. There is a little bit of ability to move past and around them, but until they are dealt with, they're going to cordon off a fair bit of space. Ed's reserve drop, as noted, will be the Libertos, which will set up in an attack position. The Libertos' mine will be on this high ground to cover the acquisition console here, and his Libertos will be on ground level near these stairs. I am going to be deploying my mines quite aggressively in this game, so we have the first Jackal mine layer on this rooftop with its mine behind this rock. This is a fairly good position because the mine can potentially detonate over both of these objectives depending on how things approach them, but it is a little bit difficult to discover shoot from further away. This Jackal is in a little bit more of an exposed position. I didn't want to put it up on the high ground here because it would be just much too easy to approach, and if I put it anywhere up on like this building here, also there's feasibly a position in this exact nook here that I could get it into a degree of safety, but it's just a little bit too easy to approach from Ed's side of the table with, for example, something like a Libertos. I consider this to be not necessarily safer, but there would be more things in the way in terms of that approach. Its mine is going to be actually deployed right next to it, and then the Yamabushi is going to be deployed behind this nook here, kind of hoping to potentially move out or otherwise act as a defensive piece. I've put the Jackal in the Yamabushi's combat group with the Yamabushi so that the two Mimetism 3 camouflage markers both belong to the same combat group and doesn't give Ed any clarity as to which is the mine and which is the Yamabushi. In my deployment zone from left to right, the Squalos and the Pathfinder Dronbot are on the low ground behind this building. The Tech B is kind of higher up, ready to assist them as needed. We've then deployed, and in terms of my reserve drops, my two reserve drops this game were very heavily constrained by the fact that I had to account for the possibility that Ed might be deploying a Greif. Ed is a perennial Greif enjoyer in any case. He uses them very frequently and very aggressively. And as a result, there are two models that I kind of have to have as my reserve drops. The first is my Lieutenant, because Ed will 100% go for a decapitation strike on turn 1 if I give him the opportunity to do so. So the Magistrate has to be a reserve drop. I deploy the Jackals that will be in his fire team here and here, giving me a fairly wide variety of possible positions I can put the Magistrate as the reserve drop, keeping it as far away from the Greif as possible. It is going to end up being behind these crates, just within 8 inches of this Jackal here. So this fire team will never move, but it will generate regular orders the entire game. The other piece that must be the reserve drop is the Red Eye, because there's another thing that Greif operators are very, very dangerous against, and that is vehicles relying on mimetism, because the Greif operator is an easy to position piece with an MSV1. In the game that I played the Zabak, ironically enough, the Zabak does not have mimetism or ballistic skill attack -3. It does have albedo. In the game I played the Zabak, I played actually against Ed, and he deployed a Greif operator, and the Zabak, one of the casualties that it inflicted on the enemy, was actually killing the Greif operator. Albedo did something. It did do nothing the entire rest of the game. Now, the Red Eye is a much better vehicle than the Zabak, and it does not have albedo, but as a mimetism firepower piece, it really does not like dealing with the potential for MSV1 shooters in its own deployment zone, so it has to be my second reserve drop. I would actually really like to, for example, have reserved the Squalos and the Pathfinder. That makes a fantastic mobile reserve element, but I can't do that because I have to respect the threat. There are points and SWC off the table, and Ed is a known Greif enjoyer. So those two things would be my reserve drops, the Magistrate and the Red Eye. Proceeding on otherwise from right to left, the Red Eye will eventually reserve drop down behind this building, just because it's probably the best place for it. Now that I know, like once Ed deploys the Libertos, okay, cool, there's no Greif. The next consideration is that the Red Eye has to be safe from the Gaurail sniper rifle, and this is the best position in the far corner of the table, actually, to give it angles to move out and around, particularly up and along my right flank, where it will not be exposed to firepower from the Gaurail, which is a huge threat to it even in reactive turn, can just slowly plink the Red Eye down in ARO. The Red Eye can't really win face-to-face with it at that distance. The Link team, with all of tactical awareness orders, is going to be positioned on and behind this building. Hacker is on the higher of the two rooftops. The Griffin Fairback is in an ARO position, with Bipandra just hanging out nearby, and the TAC-aware Pathfinder on the ground level. So that's deployment, and Ed has first turn. I declare the use of command tokens to strip orders. Ed informs me he has counterintelligence, so I take order, singular, away from his big combat group, and he kicks on with the game. And he makes some very, very good attacks, and it is really testament to just how good Kestrel's defense randomly is in any given list that includes Jackals, that I am able to not hold without casualty, but hold. There are two main thrusts of effort that Ed makes. The first is along the left flank, and the second is along my right flank, kind of horns of the bull style. Along the left flank, he makes attacks using not too many orders with his irregular pieces. The Libertos is going to come around first, with the Bounty Hunter kind of behind. It uses its impetuous order forward to move forward, but then the Libertos actually takes the attack. The Libertos comes around here, basically to face check this camouflage marker and see if it's a mine. It's not, so the Libertos continues to move around until it has the camouflage marker out of line of sight, or sorry, out of cover, and then activates to declare Discover Shoot. Because Yamabushi have heavy pistols, I actually declare face-to-face roll. I fire the pistol back. It isn't a bad face-to-face roll at all, but Ed wins that face-to-face roll and puts me dogged. With the Yamabushi dogged, the Libertos actually could potentially just stop there, but it elects to continue on not unreasonably because there are only so many ways Ed has to deal with this QAZ creature. Because he's quite limited in that respect, he doesn't really have any close combat in his list. The Libertos makes a sacrifice play, rounds the corner, detonates this mine, and fires multiple shots with his shotgun, I think splitting burst between the QAZ creature. No, so what do we do here? How did this go down? Right, he detonates the mine, just cops that on the face, wears a heavy pistol shot from the Yamabushi, and splits burst with his shotgun between the Jackal and the QAZ creature. He does not put the QAZ creature down, but he does down the Jackal to unconscious, and then just gets absolutely annihilated by all of the firepower that comes its way. I think the mine shot kills him, but that is a really good run with the Libertos. It has downed the Jackal, which is 11 points. It has put the Yamabushi dogged, which is 16 points. The only thing it failed to do was kill the QAZ creature. That is still a great trade-up. Now, the one kind of wrinkle in the plan, firstly, the Yamabushi is still dogged, and secondly, the Jackal's ARO was to place a mine. So there is still defense along this flank, which is going to keep the Bounty Hunter really from wanting to proceed particularly far. The one mistake I would say Ed makes this turn is that he, at some point later in the turn, he has enough things he needs to do. He converts the Bounty Hunter's irregular order into a regular order and leaves it there. He should absolutely have, if nothing else, moved it back and kept it as an element to attack with, even if only just waiting for the Yamabushi to die after Dogged expired, so that it still had the element. I would be able to kill it on my turn. Now, on the right flank, Ed has a line of effort that basically goes, I need to deal with this Griffin. A lot of things can't really advance until the Griffin is dealt with, and the guns that Ed has in place over there actually are not terribly unsuited to dealing with this threat. The issue is that really the firepower piece is a Sukui or K1 combi, but K1 is fine for dealing with heavy infantry. It just needs to range into within 16 inches. Once it's within 16 inches, it's got the advantage in the firepower engagement. It doesn't actually matter too much if it loses one roll and loses a wound, because it's not relying on mimetism against the Griffin anyway. And because he has oodles and oodles of zero visibility eclipse smoke, he's able to push forward and make that attack. Now, this is all going to take slightly more orders than Ed would like, which is part of what contributed to the Bounty Hunter being trapped where it ends up. But he is able to move up and lay multiple pieces of smoke, which gets this fire team around this position here and then around here, and starts taking from behind this tank 16-inch firefights with the Griffin. Now, in this exchange, the Griffin will win one face-to-face roll, put a wound on the Sukwail. The Sukwail will eventually win a face-to-face roll and put a wound on the Griffin, at which point I fail guts and I drop prone. As part of some repositioning orders, Ed is also going to successfully isolate this Jackal, which is not the end of the world. That's basically fine. It's an order out of the Squallus's team potentially, but which I'm comfortable spending just on the Jackal round by round. And then he will hunker down with the Gaurail Spitfire on this rooftop prone here, and the Kriegel agent and Sukwail hanging out behind the tank. Now, this is an interesting position because it's actually going to end up being way more difficult to attack than I would like. There are players who just have an eye for this, like you will see them occasionally, where they will push something up far more aggressively than you would ever expect, and you'll go, excellent, you've fallen into my trap, I will now engage and destroy these pieces you've extended into the midfield. And then it just turns out to be way, way harder than you ever expected. Hector from Melbourne, for anyone in Australia who has played against him, is really good at doing that. Just establishing these little positions somewhere on the table that you think is like, oh, cool, I'm going to deal with that now, and then you just can't, or it's way harder than you expect. Ed, particularly with Tohaa, Ed is pretty good at it as well. He kind of cut his teeth on that stuff, doing things like playing zone, like objective room missions, and then just turning the objective rooms into a hellscape, and it is a skill that translates to other parts of the game as well. Still, as we translate into my first turn, things are not really in a terrible state. This bounty hunter is exposed. I'm going to have a line with a squall also onto Ed's Gow Rail, and Ed does have these pieces positioned up here where I'm still hoping to do some striking into them. I've had 3 models killed or neutralized. One of them is the Yamabushi, one of them is the first of the 2 jackals, and the other is the second of the 2 jackals, which has been isolated. And while I would really like to have those jackals still alive and functioning, their loss is totally workable in exchange for surviving the first turn, particularly in a scenario like Acquisition. Acquisition is a scenario which is second player favored, kind of. The 16-inch deployment zones in Acquisition are the win condition for the first player. Because the 2 players are potentially so close, because the first player has a shorter distance to cross, making attacks against their opponent, the victory condition for player 1 is to step on the neck. It is to put the boot into the second player, put the boot in so hard that by the time turn 3 rolls around, there is nothing that the second player has to contest player 1 just strolling onto objectives. I am very, very willing to make many sacrifices in Acquisition if it means that the bulk of my force is intact and intact enough to contest the game. Not necessarily strike back really hard, but successfully contest the game for multiple consecutive turns, because my win con is just to survive with enough force intact, not to push back hard against Ed, but to clear 3 positions, all relatively exposed in the midfield. And so our attack this turn is going to be actually probably more aggressive than it should be, all things considered. I can afford to be a little bit conservative here, but I have orders to spend, and I see a little bit of red. Now, I played the second combat group just fine. The Squallos has a constrained number of orders, but it only has a couple of things it needs to do. It and the Pathfinder are going to move up and around here. They're going to occupy this high ground. That will actually get the Pathfinder have a face-to-face roll first, because with its tactical awareness order, against the Mount Bounty Hunter. Does not kill it, unsurprisingly, but they will get the Squallos into position first to kill the motorized Bounty Hunter, and then to win a face-to-face roll with the Gow Rail and force it to drop prone. It's not able to punch all the way through the Symbiomate. I would not expect it to, but it does use the Symbiomate up, taking no damage on the Gow Rail, and the Gow Rail is entirely unwilling to have a second face-to-face roll against the Squallos under that circumstance, so Ed wisely lets it drop prone. That is all I needed this team to do in this particular turn. But since I have, I think, 1 or 2 orders spare, we have still a very useful order outlet on the Squallow, because it is a grenade launcher Squallow. Now, this is a scenario with QAZ creatures. Normally, dealing with QAZ creatures warrants melee. You just move a melee trooper up. Any melee trooper usually is reasonably able to beat a QAZ creature in close combat, and because QAZ creatures ARO in zone of control, you can just move up to like a safe location, trigger the arrow, and kill the thing, and just open that space of the board up. That is what I had hoped the Yamabushi would do, but the Yamabushi inadvertently had to spend its life to buy me a turn of defense, and so the close combat kill against the QAZ creature was now not on the table. However, the Squallos has a grenade launcher, and 2 orders, rolling 9s to hit, eventually lands and destroys the QAZ creature, which takes it just, cool, it's dealt with, it's destroyed, it's no longer a concern for me. Fantastic use of 2 orders early in the game. Ed is going to have to spend basically the entire rest of the game dealing with my QAZ creature because he doesn't have the same capability. One day that will change. Probably that day will be when Corvus Belli gives McCall's close combat weapons that don't have damage of 7. Really, really hoping that's just any day now, because PS7, even on DACW, is very anemic. But for now, I secure the first and only kill with Specfire, but it's a really nice kill to have gotten. Now, on the right flank, we have a much harder problem to deal with. I do not actually have a particularly good way to close in and deal with these pieces. And the reason why I don't is that there are multiple zone of control arrows that can be made with this team, creating 0 visibility zones. I cannot realistically move the fire team out and around to take these attacks. Firstly, because these 2 pieces will trigger. I will trigger an arrow against the Kriegel, which has 6th sense. Even if I don't have stealth on anything, but even if I did, the Kriegel would have 6th sense, and the Kriegel will just smoke out itself and the Sukwale, and I will not be able to get to them. I need to get a face-to-face roll against them in the first order that I would trigger an ARO against them. And that's not something the Link team can do, so the Link team's tactical awareness orders, for example, will just be used to randomly reposition this turn. But I do have the Red Eye on the spot, and it has a lot of orders to spend, and the Gow Rail has been suppressed. So out it goes, and it will spend basically every order in the combat group, apart from the attack aware orders this turn, just doing a great many things. In approximate order, it will get the zoomies up and around to here. It will jump up and around to get plunging fire down into this position here with the Sukwale K1 and the Kriegel. After a bunch of face-to-face rolls, because the issue with doing this, because I am still constrained by Silhouette 7 on the red eye, it's not easy in one order to get really all the way up and across. I have to take sort of like plunging fire. These pieces will still have cover, and it will be inside average range. Now, I am able to face-to-face the Kriegel. It doesn't really accomplish very much. After a couple of face-to-face rolls, I eventually move to just get chain rifle shots into the two of them, and in that subsequent exchange, I will take a wound on the red eye. Smoke will go down, but I will knock the Kriegel unconscious. So after all of this, the Sukwale Lieutenant is wounded but alive, the Kriegel is unconscious, and the red eye is wounded. Now, I do have the option of just intuitive attacking into the Sukwale while it attempts to dodge, but that does not feel like a productive enough use of the turn. So the red eye is basically just going to move on at that juncture, accepting that this Sukwale is not getting killed this turn. And that is the kind of thing I mean when I say that positions like this, when you have players like Ed and Hector prepare them and defend them, actually can be way harder to attack than you might sometimes think looking at them at first glance. The red eye, regardless, is going to just zoomy up and over the top, continue up and around. It will take a few more orders than I would like. The red eye moves very, very, very fast on its first short skill, but 2 inches on the second short skill does constrain it from being truly mobile in the way that you might hope it to be, but it will eventually get up and around, and it will pop up here, seeing the back of the Gow rail, which will then dodge and reveal itself to be actually a Tagma Schema. And after a couple of face-to-face rolls, what happens? The first face-to-face roll fails. I don't get a kill against the Tagma because it is in cover. I'm not able to get far enough up to see all the way down and over the rampart. That would basically be impossible. And so I'm firing again at 0 range bands into cover. It does make the dodge and turn to face, at which point I zoom up and around here and then back shoot it. And this time it's out of cover and I get the kill. But I have consumed quite a few orders here. I'm going to move further across this direction and get plunging fire down onto the Symbio Beast, but the thing about Symbio Beast is that they dodge on 18s. Now, I actually have maybe enough orders to consider moving the red eye even further over, getting shots down toward, there's an order-generating baggage trooper back behind this sort of building here. I consider trying to do that, but there is a Sukwale HMG with a long overwatch line along this direction here. And the red eye is wounded. 2 dice at that range would be good for the Sukwale, would be bad for the red eye. The red eye would have to just eat that ARO. I'm not quite willing to do that just for a kill on a Chaxa, so I'll take a couple more face-to-face rolls with the Soda Symbio Beast, fail to kill it, and then pull back and around to here, basically ending in about this position, with the idea being I have a Chain Rifle and a Spitfire watching the K1 Sukwale Lieutenant, so that if it does anything, I can at least potentially threaten a trade. Then I pass turn back to Ed. So we can see the red eye in its final position at the end of my first turn here. Its line of fire is basically like that, so it has the Sukwale in it. It's watching in this direction here. So it can see the Sukwale and also see anything that would come around like this, which means that it can't see this table edge, which is where the Gautasos turns up, and shoots it in the back, and knocks it unconscious. Well, Gautasos is pretty good. What can you do? The Gautasos will then continue a little bit of a rampage. It will prone up and around to here. It will use distance basically to slice the pie. We have the War Correspondent and the Griffin here, and it's going to use a little bit of distance to slice the pie. It will knock the Griffin unconscious and then kill the War Correspondent. I will be able to recover the Griffin, but all told, that is an awful lot of damage from a drop troop, and it's the kind of thing that drop troops can do this edition. It's not able to knock the red eye to dead. This does still all take quite a lot of orders. It also doesn't kill the Griffin, so I do have some force reconstitution options. But even just in terms of models put unconscious, that's pretty close to 90 points of stuff, which is a very good outcome. It does use the Lieutenant order, staying prone, trying to avoid sort of certain other lines of fire. At some point during the turn, it does use the Lieutenant order to try and finish off the red eye, but the red eye's no cover rule has turned off when it went unconscious and it is on higher ground, and as a result, it just barely passes its saves against the Sukwale's K1 combo rifle hits. That's a little bit unfortunate for Ed, all told, and I am going to try and recover the red eye as a result, but still a good counter-offensive turn in terms of cutting down 3 SWC worth of my pieces. The issue is that they are recoverable and it's not enough damage. If you are going first in acquisition, you have to do more even than Ed is doing right now. Ed is playing very well with kind of limited pieces into one of the best defensive factions in the game. It's not proving to be quite enough, but this is still a very good attack. But my tag is still alive, and he can't meaningfully threaten it, and he can't meaningfully defend against it. The Gao Rail is going to stand back up at some point during this turn, but it will get shot right back down next turn. So jumping into my turn 2, we're at about the lowest ebb of orders here, with the Griffin being unconscious and the Red Eye being unconscious, but Ed is suffering as well. And the first thing we're going to do is put down the Gao Rail that would otherwise impede my progression. Now, the Gao Rail has moved. It took a face-to-face roll last turn against the Squalos. But the thing about a Gao Rail is that it is wielding a sniper rifle. And sniper rifles are just burst 2, damage 5. They're kind of shite. They are certainly not the weapon that you want to use against a full health Squalos main battle tag, and that has left the Gao Rail standing in this position here looking through this window, and so the Squalos just spend its tactical awareness order after it cuts away, moves forward, takes the face-to-face roll, and puts the Gao Rail. I think it takes a wound, I think, on the ARO, but the second shot puts the Gao Rail all the way to dead. Cool, mission accomplished. Would have been much harder to do had it been a Sook Whale sniper. Obviously, the Gao Rail does have an MSV too, but we're feeling pretty conclusive after this game that it's better just to take the Sook Whale, even if you fear there is a threat of smoke shooting. We have plenty of orders left on the tag after that, including a reposition order using the tactical awareness order from the Pathfinder, so they're going to come up and around. Now, I would like to have had maybe slightly more orders than I do, but they can move up fairly aggressively up to positions kind of around here on this high ground, and eventually take plunging fire down, including into a suppressive fire Gao Tarsos, which will put it to unconscious or dead. The only thing I don't get to kill this turn on this flank is the Sook Whale, who is saving her Symbio Bomb and is going to successfully smoke out again when I move forward with this fire team. This fire team does get to spend basically all of its orders this turn. We can see the Pathfinder drawn bot here, having moved forward earlier. We are going to first have Bipandra activate and recover the Griffin. She does need to spend one of my 2 remaining command tokens. She fails the first roll, 13 into a 10, fail, reroll, 13 succeeds the first time. I then spend a command token to reform this fire team and move out, and in doing so, even though I make the hacker the link leader, so that as I move my Pathfinder around, I get the Sook Whale into zone of control, I declare Spotlight, Ed goes, I'm not resetting against that, boom, Ferroware, smoke goes down, yet another turn where I'm not going to be able to deal with the Sook Whale, price of dealing with Tohaa. He is at least now out of Symbio Bombs, but we really can't proceed with this team. So what we do is we just spend another order, we pull the biological elements of the team basically back to kind of that position that they're in, and we call down our Speedball. We call down an auto repair kit, and it lands next to the Pathfinder. I also call down another one in and near that group. It turns out to be a second auto repair kit, which I don't need. It fails to land, and it ends up landing somewhere on the table edge. Doesn't matter. But the Pathfinder, who still has its taco aware and a bunch of orders left, swings by, picks it up, moves up and around here, and recovers the Red Eye. Now, the Red Eye's airborne rule should turn off, or vehicle, whatever the rule is, turns off its automatic equipment, so it turns off when the Red Eye goes unconscious, which means I can get into base-to-base contact with the Gizmo Kit in order to recover it, restores it to 1 wound, and then it doesn't really do anything because it doesn't really have any targets. I am going to activate it and pull it back and around. I'm going to put the Pathfinder in suppressive fire, but I've kind of done all the damage I can with the orders that I have in this turn. It's in a fine place, all things considered. Ed's moved the Diplomatic Delegate up, but there's just difficulty doing all of the things that he particularly wants to do. He just isn't nearly on the table enough in a scenario like Acquisition to make the last turn be decisive. But he will do his level best, and it's going to be the Sook Whale HMG team that has the bulk of the work to do. The Sook Whale Lieutenant is going to spend her LT order. She's going to crawl across and press this button and stand in base contact with it, and then basically the entire rest of the game is the Sook Whale HMG song and dance. They are, however, going to be constrained by this QAZ creature. Ed will take 1 crack at the QAZ creature with Ferroware moving into and out of zone of control of the QAZ creature, face-to-face rolling 3 dice on 14s versus 3 dice on 11s, which is not the face-to-face roll you necessarily want to be having, and it is inconclusive as it turns out. Now, the tack wheel and the sook wheel do have orders to spend. Ed consolidates both of his combat groups prior to this turn beginning, but all they are really going to be able to accomplish is to put the red eye back down to unconscious and then swing around to basically try and hold this position in the middle. They will get, yes, they will get the first wound on the Squallows as part of the face-to-face roll. It will guts back, and they are now in a position where Ed is going to be in control of the central antenna, in control of the right antenna, and having activated the right antenna, but these are all pieces that are basically in the open. That's a really grim position to try and hold, and as we flip into my third turn, the lines of play here are pretty clear. The Squallows is going to do the bulk of the work, engaging these pieces in the midfield, but I will have the Pathfinder activate and backshoot the Sook Whale using its tactical awareness order. The Squallows will then deal with pretty much all of these pieces in the midfield. The Griffin will contribute as well, because I'm hitting, basically, I'm attacking with big weapons, oh, and a combi rifle, but still, I'm attacking from all of these different angles into these positions, and because they are forced to be on these antennas, there's really just not a ton of cover. It's not an easy position to hold, and so when the dust clears, when the gun smoke rolls off the table, at the end of this turn, I have so many orders still because this is such a high order count list that this Pathfinder has gotten onto this central objective, sorry, this right objective, and has activated and controlled it. This Pathfinder is on this left objective and has activated it and controls it, and the Squallows has come forward into the center and controls it. I'm securing Ed's HVT, which makes this I think this is a 10-0 win, and a pretty clean showcase of what you can get with a combination of big guns, high mobility, and a fantastic defensive faction going second in acquisition. Now, as noted, how would I have felt playing into Ed's Tohaa if I had been going first? Pretty damn grim, to be honest, because Ed knows exactly how to play this scenario in this particular way. As noted previously, he was intentionally putting himself in the more difficult situation to try and learn how to play it. That's how we develop as players, and so full credit to him for doing that, and for trying out pieces like the Gautasos and the Galrail. Gautasos did pretty good. Galrail, definitely not so much. But I've played neither of those in N5, so these are the first times I've seen them on the table, and yeah, interesting to see. Overall, as always, against Ed, this was an absolute cracker of a game. And, just as a reminder, a big thanks to Mr. Pink Panda, channel supporter, for the challenge and bat rep to do a Kestrel battle report with a Squallows HMG in one group and a Red Eye in the other. Mr. Pink Panda, I hope you enjoyed this battle report. This one was for you. Just as a quick reminder and channel plug, if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description below, or by becoming a channel member on YouTube. Big thanks to everyone who has so far. I take requests for battle reports and faction focuses from channel supporters via both of those venues. I do not always get to them in a timely fashion, but they all get noted down and they all go onto the list, and I try and get as many of them done as possible. This one is long overdue, but very glad to have finally gotten to it. Otherwise, usual YouTube stuff, hit like, hit subscribe, etc, etc. I have no idea what effect it has on anything like the algorithm, but it certainly can't hurt, so go ahead and press those buttons. Otherwise, and as always, I hope very much that you've enjoyed this. I'll be back next week with more Infinity. Have yourselves a good week, and I will see you next time.